Hello there and welcome to 3Spoonies. We're your hosts, Karen, Jo and Claire. This is episode 34 and we're discussing getting disabled people back to work. Join us as we dive in.
If you've been in business for a while, but you're still doing it all on your own, spinning your wheels and second-guessing everything, it's time to ignite. I'm Sheena Wyatt, and my Ignite membership is a business growth accelerator designed to help you build momentum, with missions, tools, and gamified support that makes it feel doable again. For just $6.99 a month, you'll get a powerful mix of structure, motivation, and community, all at your own pace. Explore more at heroes.kapowme.com/start-ignite.
Hello, I'm Karen from Pony Pony Pony.
And I'm Jo from Bright Cat Business Solutions.
And I'm Claire from Sparkle's Gift Boutique.
And we're 3Spoonies navigating our way through life and business with not enough spoons. Today we are joined by lovely Sarah Berthon.
Hello.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much for inviting me on your podcast. So I'm Sarah Berthon and I am founder of Excel Against the Odds. And I live with several chronic illnesses, chronic fatigue syndrome, POTS syndrome, and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, as well as chronic migraine. So definitely a spoonie.
Yeah, I think we have, between the three of us, we have a cross section of that as well. So yeah, we're feeling you, definitely.
In good company.
Yeah.
Yeah,
very much so. So we are going to be talking about different ways to get disabled people back into work, and the lovely Jo will be asking you some questions. So I'll just pass to Jo. Whoosh!
Whoosh. Okay, hey Sarah, thank you for joining us. Firstly, could you tell us a little bit about Excel Against the Odds?
Yes, certainly. So Excel Against the Odds, I founded it about 6 years ago. It started as a result of a personal need. So I lost my career when I first got diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, probably about 17 years ago now, I think it is. And I tried to find a way of working that would work for me. Did eventually get some part-time work, but I could never have the ambitions that I had would never be satisfied because I just don't have enough spoons to work full time or to travel or any of that sort of thing. So eventually I came up with the idea of starting my own business, and I set up a business making natural organic skincare, and I would make kits for children to make their own as well. And I absolutely loved it, but I found myself getting into a vicious cycle where I'd push myself really hard, then I would crash and burn, have to take time out, and then start again. And it was a horrible cycle that I was in. And I started to realise that running my business wasn't that compatible with my health condition. But I thought that there must be a way of running a business in a way that worked with my health. So I tried to find some help. And all the help I was getting was very much around just push yourself, just do this, that, and the other. You should be doing this. You should be on social media 24 hours a day and all of the above. And it just wasn't working for me. So in the end, I set up a Facebook group, Entrepreneurs Against the Odds, for business owners with chronic illnesses, just to get that community and to know that there are other people going through what I was going through. And from there, I've had lots of conversations with people to understand exactly what their challenges were and to understand how best to help them. I then started mentoring and providing training. I've now got a membership, and I then also moved into supporting people in the workplace as well, because my experiences of working in corporate organisations with having a chronic illness were very varied. There were some companies who were doing it amazingly and other companies who were doing absolutely terribly. So I wanted to create some training to help organisations to better support employees with chronic illnesses as well.
That all sounds fantastic. And yes, we really do understand that. Just keep pushing, burn yourself out and crash and burn. We've all done that. And we'll probably do it again.
Absolutely. I think it's inevitable to a certain extent.
Having just crashed and burned and lost a bunch of clients because of it, on one hand, that's crap. That means I've got to work harder to get my money in. On the other hand, it makes catching up easier. I'm looking at it that way. But yeah, do you find that a lot of disabled people will then go the way of working for themselves because there isn't those accommodations there in the workplace. Because I know that's how the three of us kind of ended up here.
Yeah, I think that's often the case, is that traditional employment just isn't possible because of the current situation, some current way that employment is set up. You often have a set number of days you're allowed to have off sick per year. And if you've got chronic migraine, for example, that's impossible to meet that target because you have no choice but to take time off when you've got a migraine. You just cannot drive into work or sit in an office.
No.
So the way that traditional employment is currently set up isn't very favourable towards people with chronic illnesses. And as a result, people who want to work and who have capability to work will often move more into the self-employment route, not necessarily through choice, but maybe through necessity instead.
Yeah. Do you find that there's certain industries that disabled people take to better? Or is it very much on the person?
Yeah, very much on the person. I have seen people across the board doing so many different things that I'm actually quite shocked at the variety of different industries that people are working in and different types of roles that they're doing. I think generally, obviously, being home based and use more of an online world seems to work better because of the flexibility that involves and the not having to sit in an office or to be on your feet too long. But in terms of industries, I think it's very much across the board.
But that's interesting to see. Okay, so you said you help organisations to help disabled people. What does that look like?
So at the moment, I'm mainly doing training and talks around raising awareness. I think it's a big topic at the moment. Obviously, there's a lot going on with the government and in the press around trying to help people back into the workplace. So the workplaces need to be more accommodating to enable people back into the workplace. It needs to be a culture where people feel that they are able to disclose their conditions. I think there are a lot of people working who haven't disclosed their conditions. And the reason they don't disclose it is because they are rightly fearful that they might not get the support that they need and they might cost them promotion or have an impact on their career in some way. So I think the most important thing is to change the culture to enable people to disclose their conditions, which will then enable them to ask for the support that they need to keep them working. A lot of people will leave the workplace because they aren't able to ask for that support, and that support might mean make the difference between them being able to stay or not stay. So creating that, changing that culture, enabling people to stay in work is so important. And I think that's what I'm trying to help corporate organisations to do, is to make the workplace a really safe place where people can say, I need this help, and then get it without any issues at all.
Yeah, I personally, I think if workplaces were more flexible, fluctuating conditions would be managed much easier because we all know what it's like in the corporate world. You go, I can do this because I have to do this. You need the money, and then you will push yourself to make yourself ill, possibly permanently. And I think that's a horrible way to look at it. Whereas if they allow people to work flexibly from home, different times, unless they're actually customer facing, so long as the work gets done, what's the problem? But that's not the micromanaging way, is it?
No, absolutely. And I think often as well, we very much base like salaries are based on the number of hours you work rather than the work that you produce. So I know a lot of people that I'm working with are incredibly quick at getting their work done because you have to be. You've got limited amount of time that you can work, and yet that's not reflective in terms you're expected to work a set number of hours rather than produce a set amount of work, which I think is a it would work much better if it changed.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Absolutely. Ladies, do you have any questions about helping people in the actual corporate world or on the employer side of things?
Yeah, I was wondering about that openness because I know that I didn't disclose a lot of my problems until I hit a crisis point, at which point it was a bit too late. It's what can people practically be doing potentially from induction to help people be a bit more open and honest?
I think it needs to start from the top down, where people at the top are open about health conditions. One in three has some sort of long-term health condition. So even it would be worth if people could start discussing those a bit more openly in the workplace. I think that would really help. And I know some organisations now are having targets where the number of people sitting in the C-suite having chronic health conditions or disabilities is being set, so that it actually encourages more people with those conditions to be in the top layers of the organisation. And once that happens, that can then the message gets passed down through the organisation. I think just being open and having those conversations at an early stage, asking if people need those adjustments to be made is also very important. So making it really clear that you will get support if you need it, and there won't be any issues if you do ask for that support. So I think having those open conversations, having different groups within the organisation, so disability friendly groups or chronic illness friendly groups to provide that support can also be really useful as well.
Yeah, I think peer support does count for a lot. Sometimes in those practical suggestions that you wouldn't necessarily think of unless you've experienced it yourself.
Yeah, and often it doesn't need to be the changes that you need don't need to be expensive at all. I think most reasonable adjustments aren't expensive. They are just changes in attitude. So we touched upon flexible working, maybe even a place where you can work from, hours that you work. So, for example, starting work slightly later so that you can miss the rush hour can be really beneficial for somebody who's struggling with exhaustion and is unable to stand on the train. Having changes to the lighting in a building can make a big difference to somebody who is living with migraines. There are so many changes that can be made and they don't have to have a huge impact on the business. It's just knowing what is needed and having those conversations. And also for organisations to understand that no two people with the same conditions are experiencing it in the same way. So there might be two people with the same condition, but one thing will help one person, but it won't have any impact on the other person. They will need something else. And it's taking away any assumptions, asking what people need, and then listening and responding is the right way to do it.
Absolutely. And Karen has previously had a rant about lighting and migraines several times.
I have.
I worked for one organisation where they listened. I said I thought I was having problems with the lighting, and they went out and bought desk lamps for everybody. And whenever I walked into the office, because I was working part time, they would turn off the main light. Everyone would turn on their desk lamp. They would make no fuss about it, and it just made a world of difference to me. It was just so nicely
Oh,
done because I
lovely.
don't want to feel like I'm being a nuisance. They just did it so naturally.
That sounds amazing. Dear employers, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that and things that can benefit lots of people. It's like there's one building I worked in when you couldn't open any of the windows, and theoretically it was all temperature controlled and everything, but it wasn't really. And by about 2 in the afternoon, you couldn't breathe anymore because we'd used up all the oxygen in the building, and the lighting was horrible, and there were rooms with no natural light at all. It was just not the best. But to be fair to that organisation, I said, look, this is dreadful. And they said, we see why you're having a problem. We can move you to another building which has big, lovely windows that open and natural light and things like that. So you can't replace the building, which fair, but here's a solution for you. So in the long term, I think maybe they'll have to do something about the building, but I understand that's not always a short-term option.
I
It's
think
great that they listened to you though, wasn't it? But offered you a solution. I think that's all you ask for, isn't it? Is for people to listen and then help in the best way they can.
Oh, yeah, to be fair, they were very proactive, very willing to help. They suggested things. It's like, oh, okay, yes, I'd not thought of that actually. And she'd gone to speak to some other people to get some suggestions and things without making a drama or naming names or anything. It's like, oh, not used to that.
Yeah.
Someone being helpful.
usually expected to just deal with it. But I think a lot of employers, like, they think accommodation and they think it's going to be something huge and expensive, and therefore they don't want to know. And I think, yeah, that mindset shift, too many S's, is a thing that's needed. It's like, it doesn't have to be a huge thing, but it could help your employee, and then you get the best out of them.
Absolutely.
I think that's the disconnect. They don't really like look at it as getting the best out of their employee. They just see bums on seats.
Yeah, well, the cost to onboard someone, to lose a good employee because you won't give them a screen filter or consider flexible working, that can't be cost effective.
No, and when people do find that their organisation is making those changes for them, they're going to be very loyal because they don't know how else they're going to be treated in another organisation. So people often become very loyal to their employers if they are well looked after and those changes are made.
Yeah,
I think it's worth talking quickly about access to work as well, because that is something that can really help employees to stay within an organisation. But often you need the support of your company to be able to request access to work because some of the payments need to be paid up front. But access to work is known as the DWP's best kept secret, but actually enables employees to request equipment for their office to enable them to work if they've got a disability. And it's a great resource. There's a huge backlog at the moment, but if you can get it, it is a brilliant resource to have.
It is. I mean, I'm told today that they're on February of last year. So
Oh, good grief.
That's far. Like, that's insane.
yeah, one of my clients has been waiting. He messaged me today, said he'd finally spoken to somebody, and I put my claim in about a month after he did. So I'm getting there.
You need to pay an
Slowly going along.
oncologist for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great when they get to you. But yeah, you just need to,
Exactly.
well, you might need to wait a bit. Hopefully they'll sort all that out eventually, because it's becoming less of a best kept secret. Because disabled people keep going, there's a thing, it can help us. Because as we do, we tend to talk to each other
Very much
Yeah.
so.
and share what works. Claire, do you have any questions around the corporate world?
I do. Karen actually asked what I wanted, so I did actually manage to
Oh,
think of another one. My brain worked today. I'm so impressed. So my question is kind of like a two answer question. It's so why you've been doing all this and educating businesses and helping them kind of change how they are. What's been your biggest challenge with it? And if you had something that you thought was going to be a challenge and actually ended up being really easy.
I think the biggest challenge is actually for people to take it seriously and to see it as a necessity for their organisation. I think I met with quite a lot of people saying, actually, we don't have that problem in our organisation, but the figures would prove otherwise. I think that actually goes to show that if people think they haven't got people living with chronic illness in their organisation, it probably means that the culture is such that those people aren't disclosing their chronic illnesses. I think the statistics are just too great for them not to. If you've got 2,000 employees, you're going to have people living with chronic illnesses. I think for them to think there isn't a problem is the biggest issue. So I think that's definitely trying to persuade people that they need to take chronic illness seriously is my biggest challenge. I think things like diversity are hot, and menopause are hot topics at the moment, and organisations are investing a lot in those. But with chronic illness, I don't think it's taken as seriously as those other conditions. So I think that's probably my biggest challenge. And I can't remember the second half of the question, I'm
It
afraid.
was, is there, that's all right. I mean, I'm impressed that we went through all of that and I remembered what it was. Normally I forget again. What was it? So it was, is there something that you thought you were going to have to kind of mention as a change or fight for as a change that you thought was going to be hard work, but actually turned out being quite easy?
I think when I speak to organisations and talk about things like reasonable adjustments and changing culture, people have been a lot more open to it than I might have expected. So I think that sort of understanding that the reasonable adjustments can be quite simple and not cost so much money, I think means that people actually are starting to have the penny drop. But actually, we can make those changes, and it will impact the organisation and the employees very positively. So that's been quite reassuring.
Yeah. And the more that it's kind of known about between businesses and it's working, it's obviously going to help spread that awareness at the same time.
It absolutely is, yes. Yeah, and I think that's what I would like with all this government talk at the moment about getting people back into work. It's there's got to be a lot of work done in the organisations as well to make that possible. It can't just be on the individuals themselves to find the jobs. They need to find jobs which are going to be open to them and support them. So those corporate organisations really do need to focus on how they can better support employees with chronic illnesses.
They do.
Yeah, I know.
I think we
I've
need to
had
get rid of the culture of not talking about it as well and hiding it, because that'll make it easier for those employers.
Definitely. Yeah.
Sorry, Claire, what were you saying?
as I say, like I had the struggle recently, like Joe and Karen know, of just I was like, oh, do I just go back and what people would say get a normal job? And was just toying with the idea of something part time, just but obviously doing something from home. It's like, well, what would I do? I don't know. Because I've always worked in retail and hospitality before I done this, and I'd sit there and I'd go online and look at jobs, even part time. And my husband's like, it's a great idea. He said, but you can't guarantee you to be there on the days you're signing up for, and you could get there and be absolutely nothing. It's in your head, it's a great idea, but when you put it into practicality, it doesn't always work. So I think for people to have that flexibility of working from home, it definitely makes life a lot easier.
It certainly does. And I think since COVID, it's much more acceptable for people to work from home. So I think as long as that continues and there's not that big push to get people back into the office, then it's going to be good for people with illnesses.
Mm. Yeah, I think some things are definitely improving. It's someone I know recently started a new job, and at the end of the first week, his line manager said, "Oh, can I speak to you briefly at the end of the week?" And he went, "Oh no, what have I done wrong? Oh no." And the line manager said, "Right, how are things going? What can we do to help you? Is there anything that isn't in place that needs to be either for you or anyone else?" And he went, "Oh, you're nice."
Oh, I think we're so kind of expecting that kind of you're not working up to a certain standard or you're not working fast enough that you're automatically on that kind of, oh shit, what have I done?
Yeah, that was
You know,
that is what everybody thinks when someone says, "Can I have a word?" It's like, what have I
yeah,
done or not done?
absolutely. Even if a friend messages you like, oh, can we have a chat? You're like, what's wrong? What's happened? It's that automatic kind of panic kind of thing. It doesn't could be for something brilliantly good, but your mind just goes to the worst place.
It does. Karen, should we take a break and then we'll come back and talk about self-employment?
Yep. Well, on that positive note, it's time for some spoons full of loveliness. Here's some lovely things from our sponsors.
Ellie couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement in the air. Octavian bustled about giving instructions on what needed to be packed up and loaded onto the toboggans.
If you would prefer to watch an author read a book to you, you've come to the right place. We have a growing selection of video books to enjoy, including the military-style action thriller Danger in Paradise, the young adult fantasy novel Ellie and the Underworld, the gentle romance of Overture Beginners, children's stories about Squeak and his adventures, or The Boy Who Heard the World, and the Nordic crime series A Case for Lena Larson. greencatbooks.com. Create your legacy.
Today, we're spotlighting SICK, a social enterprise that works to close the disability employment gap. Via the SICK Learning Hub, they provide free events, e-learning, resources, training programs and a magazine to empower disabled and neurodivergent professionals. At the same time, they partner with businesses, large and small, offering inclusive recruitment training, bespoke workshops, accessible away days and ongoing consultancy. Their mission? Connect untapped talent with progressive employers, transforming workplaces into inclusive cultures, proving that hiring disabled people isn't charity, it's smart business. If your organisation wants to become truly accessible, or you're a disabled professional seeking development, check out SICK's free tools and expert programmes.
Welcome back. We have been discussing getting disabled people into work for those who can. And we must emphasise it is those who can, because not everybody can. We've been discussing the corporate world, and so we thought we'd take a little bit of a look at self-employment. Is there any barriers that the self-employed face that those in the corporate world don't?
So I think if somebody's thinking about starting their own business, obviously there's a lot to take into account. So the fact that you don't get any sick pay, for example, or holiday pay is very important. You often don't get the insurances that you might get from working with somebody for another organisation as well, because often you might have health cover or you might have some sort of like life insurance as part of your work. And you don't have that when you're self-employed. So you have to think about all of that, pensions as well. So there is definitely a different side when you're working for yourself than if you're working for somebody else. So do need to take that into account. I think for disabled entrepreneurs, there's also some inequalities compared to non-disabled entrepreneurs. Things like getting access to finance is particularly big issue, and just all the support I mentioned earlier about the fact that I found it very difficult to get any sort of support running a business with chronic illness. The advice that I was getting just was not compatible with having a chronic illness. So I think there are definitely some disadvantages. I'm currently working on a project. It's called the Lilac Review, which is a government-backed independent review looking at tackling the inequalities faced by disabled entrepreneurs. And we're coming up to launching the final report. And then after that, some actions are being taken to try and really put some changes in place, but we have come across a lot of inequalities, and it's been very interesting. There's been hundreds of interviews carried out, focus groups and surveys, and it's been very interesting to get to see what the challenges are that people are facing.
I look forward to that one. I've been hearing about the Light Review for a while, and yeah, I think it'll do a lot of good so long as people pay attention. You touched on finance and things, and I was going to wait till the end for that, but the way we came across you was at the Small Business Sunday winners event this year. And we were actually stood waiting for our certificates, being very angry at the answer you got to your question. And as it turns out, so was every other disabled person in the room. And as disabled people make up 25% of all small businesses, that's probably quite a bit. But yeah, you asked the Openness how disabled people could secure funding in regard, especially considering their limitations. And his completely useless answer was just try harder, which, as we know, with limited energy and limited time, just doesn't work.
No,
I
absolutely.
mean, if I could try harder, I'd have more money in my business. I wouldn't feel like death every day. I think the other guy's answer really pissed me off as well about, are I investing in small businesses? Yeah, if they're doing like a massive turnover, that's not a small business. That's an established business. Oh yeah, I ranted a lot on the way home that day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the answer was not helpful at all. I think it isn't an issue of working harder either. The figures show that you are 400 times less likely to get investment in your business if you have a disability than if you don't have a disability. And that's not down to working harder. It's down to the fact that investors are looking at whether they want to invest in you and your business. And if you've got a disability or chronic illness, then maybe they might be questioning in their head, oh, can we expect to get a good return on our investments? Sorry about that. So that, I think, is part of the issue. I think that there isn't anybody really looking at how organisations and investors look at disabled entrepreneurs and invest in them, and that's a real shame, I think. And that's what I was trying to get when I asked the question. I was generally hoping that then he might have some suggestions. Maybe he might have known people who do invest in disabled entrepreneurs, and that's what I was trying to get to. I really wanted to explore that question a bit more and see what can be done to support people with disabilities to get that investment, because it's almost impossible at the moment.
Yeah, and yet the answer was completely inadequate, and yet we were somewhat angry.
A lot of people came up to me afterwards.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, we fully understand, like, it is difficult to get investment. I mean, for myself, for my business, I need to grow a team, so I'm not doing all the work. So then when I do have issues, everything doesn't drop off, but you've then got to get to that point without losing the money that's paying your bills.
Exactly. And also investors want you to have a team before they invest in you. So it just doesn't work. You can't grow a team without the money, but you can't get the money without a team. It's very difficult.
There is a bottleneck there, and I'd imagine that's the point where most disabled people get stuck, even if they're doing really well.
Yeah, because if everything's relying on the one person and you do have a condition that fluctuates, you are going to have bad health days when you can't work. So as much as you can do things like automations and setting up your business as best as possible so that it can still run when you have a bad health day, nothing beats having a team where you can pass things on to other team members when you're having that bad health time. So it is, if you are able to grow your business to the point where you have got a team, it just makes it that much easier to run your business.
Yeah. And I hope anybody who wants to get there does. Fingers crossed for everybody. But yeah, anyway, after that little rant, because that there may have been quite a lot of ranting afterwards as well. Because
it was ranting in the queue, right?
It was ranting in the queue. There was ranting afterwards over wine. And I assume ranting on the way home for you, Claire.
Yeah, I mean, people I spoke to afterwards, I think for a few days, a lot of people felt the same. And it was messages back and forth between people, kind of about how they felt about it. So it was really nice when, I can't remember who put the first post in the group about it.
I believe it was Amanda.
I think it was,
right. Yeah. And it was just really nice to have someone, she wasn't going on full moan. It was being really sympathetic to the question that Sarah asked, being like, this is kind of what we wanted and didn't feel that we got. It was nice to kind of know that you weren't on your own feeling like that. You have that moment of thinking, is it just me taking it the wrong way? Am I being a bit sensitive because I'm in a lot of pain today? And yeah, so it was nice to know that other people heard the question the right way, and the answer was just shit.
Well, it's also transfer that to any other group, like women aren't getting enough investments. Well, can you try to be less female? Or what?
Yeah,
I found it because we were all talking about it. It made me wonder. It's like, yes, Theo champions small businesses, and various big business people do, but do they all think the same way? Of we just need to try harder, and obviously that even if they are investors, will then impact how they think of us again, as well as like, can they deliver? Well, they're just not trying hard enough, and clearly, if your business can't quite make it without that investment, you're not trying hard enough. And I sort of wondering, is that the prevailing thought? And we did try and get Theo on the podcast. Apparently, he's too busy, despite the fact we gave him pretty much an entire year flexibility, because including over winter, and we're currently not recording over winter because we all get very ill over winter.
we hibernate.
Yeah, so we can hibernate over winter. By the end of October, we'll have, I think it's up to May recorded.
But yeah, he's a busy man apparently.
Yeah, he's a very busy man. But I would like to get someone at some point that's in big business and sort of find out how they think.
And also, like, as you said, it's 25% of small businesses. That's a massive amount to miss out on, and potentially a huge amount of innovation that investors are missing out on because they've written people off. I mean, especially if there are people who've had to think differently and innovate, because as we all know, doing 9 to 5 and doing what we used to do doesn't work for us.
Yeah, and you think if they invested in the smaller businesses that have got disabilities and they are struggling, like you're giving inspiration to other people that have been toying with the idea, but are like, oh, I don't know if it would work. You're kind of giving them a focus to push towards and potentially get out of like a dark way of feeling about what they're going through themselves. You're giving them a bit of hope and like, oh, there's a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Just because you can't work a normal 9 to 5, you can do this for yourself.
When I'm speaking to other VAs or other business owners, when I find out they're also disabled or dealing with issues, it's like, I want to work with them because I know what they're going through. And yeah, I'd like to build a team that may all have chronic illnesses or disabilities, and then we can support each other. Because I find that so important. Because if you're on your own, because I was speaking to somebody at that event, and we both have fibro, and she's like, I'm so glad I met you. I think it was fate, because she'd been struggling alone with people that didn't understand. And so I think having that community, and like the Lilac Review, that's gone and asked all these people, so they can get that consensus, that we can then support each other because we understand.
Definitely. I think also because Theo talked about resilience, and yet the most resilient people I know are people with chronic illnesses who do run businesses. I mean, the fact that you're able, running a business is incredibly hard, living with chronic illness is incredibly hard. So to do both of them shows an awful lot of resilience. I don't think you can do much more than that.
No, I knew disabled people are extremely resilient. It's like they work to ways to around to do everything, and yet if they're managing to run a business at the same time, you're not going to find anyone more resilient than that.
No.
Any questions around self-employment, ladies?
No. My brain's just gone poof.
Obviously it's a topic we know well because we're doing it. I'm sure I had another question, but we had a rant and then my brain went off.
That's the thing, my brain just went.
What can people do if they're looking at self-employment and they want to try something completely new? Are there avenues out there to find out what's available? And especially with things like new technology now, there may be jobs that didn't exist 2 years ago. Where do you find out what's out there?
I think probably a good thing to do is to join a group of other people who are entrepreneurs, or particularly if they're disabled entrepreneurs, just to hear what other people are doing, because it always surprises me what sort of businesses people are running. And the way I found out about it is I find out all these different types of entrepreneurship is through talking to people and finding out what they do. And there are so many different things that are available. I think often we have quite set ideas about what we might be able to do, might think about selling a product but there are so many different types of service businesses as well as product-based businesses, and having conversations that sort of helps you to become inspired and start thinking about what you could do yourself. So I think networking, joining groups of disabled entrepreneurs in particular, can be a really good way of doing that.
I'd agree with that. Plus, it helps you find out what you're passionate about as well as what's actually possible around your disability.
Yeah, very much so. I think, yeah, when you can find out what people are able to do with their different types of health conditions and how they run their business around their health, having those conversations can be really enlightening.
Yeah, and yeah, it often give you ideas of things you would never think of before. But I think they're great resources for people.
Yeah, potential collaborations as well. Sometimes you speak to someone, it's like, I didn't know that was a thing. Is that a thing?
Very much so.
Right, if none of us have any further questions, I'll pass back to Karen to wrap up this episode.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for joining us. It's been really valuable to have your perspective. Is there anything exciting that you're doing at the moment that you'd like to plug or let us know about?
I have I have a Facebook group that people are free to come and join. It's called Entrepreneurs Against the Odds. And then I also have a membership where we do networking and co-working, as well as coaching and have masterclasses, and that's called the Chronic Empowerment Hub.
Thank you so much. We will put the links to all of that in the show notes. So if that's of interest to you, do go along and find out more. So thank you for joining us, 3Spoonies, on getting people back to work. We'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for our weekly podcast and leave us a review. You can also buy us a coffee if you like what we do. All the links, as we said, will be in the show notes, so you can have a good old nosy. We'll see you next week for the community questions. Have a great day and keep track of your spoons.